Welcome to Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and today we have a super exciting show because it's a two-part show. We're breaking down a big rumor that just came out with the Minnesota Timberwolves, a report claiming that Anthony Edwards is advocating for a Kyrie Irving trade. We're going to break down why that's interesting, potentially significant, whether it's a great fit, what a trade might look like, and we're also going to talk about a positive or a few positive trends with this Minnesota Timberwolves team, a 15-8 Timberwolves team coming off of beating the Los Angeles Clippers the other night. Jaden McDaniels, Jaylen Clark, Naz Reid, all playing fantastic. So we're going to give those guys the spotlight throughout this episode. But before we get into all of it, please subscribe to Wilder Wolves because this is a growing community in which we break down everything Timberwolves, the team, what is going on specifically with the team, hot takes, interviews, most importantly, fan engagement, fan interaction. This is a community in which we're building that is going to embrace and is embracing a fan base, the best fan base in the NBA, the Minnesota Timberwolves. If you guys want to be on a Wilder Wolves episode, we have Wolves Fandom Friday in which we embrace the fans. We get fans on the show, and you guys have the opportunity, the platform to give your biggest takeaways, your hottest takes with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So subscribe to Wilder Wolves, and if you want to be on Wolves Fandom Friday, email me wilder@wilderadams.com, or you can DM me what's on tap NBA, Instagram, and X. So let's get into this show. Super exciting rumor. So this is a rumor coming from Scoop B. Robinson, who he's an NBA media personality. He's been a reporter for years. He's been around the block. And his quote, a well-placed and respected NBA fixture, shared a belief that Irving, when healthy, would be the missing piece for Minnesota. That isn't necessarily the report, but this next line is, they also shared that Anthony Edwards himself is advocating for the move. That's what's different, and that's what's possibly significant about this report. It isn't that Minnesota is necessarily after Kyrie Irving or they're engaging with a trade right now. That's not what the report is. It's that Anthony Edwards is an advocate for this move. And if your superstar is pushing for a move like Anthony Edwards, you're going to think about it. You should consider it. Consider that possibility. Keep your superstar healthy. I'm not saying that it means you go desperate and you go after Kyrie without any bumpers, without any, boundaries. It just means you have to consider it. And now the question is Kyrie Irving a good fit for the Minnesota Timberwolves? My answer is a clear yes. Kyrie Irving is a good fit. And look, I understand he is dealing with injuries. He's still recovering from the ACL. He's coming back January, and there's going to be an adjustment period for Kyrie Irving because he's coming off of an ACL injury. You just don't hit the ground running, not playing basketball for a year. So that is a deal that would take time, would probably be more beneficial next season than this season. So there's definitely that to consider. But here's the truth with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is one of the greatest clutch players of our generation. Where does Minnesota lack right now? In the clutch. Minnesota lacks a point guard. Kyrie Irving, even though he's a shot first player, is a damn good point guard. One of the best of our generation. Check. Anthony Edwards, interest. Check. And I also think Kyrie Irving still has a few years left of high-end basketball where he is still, a legit 25 point per game scorer. I personally don't think this ACL is going to hold him back. Some people could disagree, right? He was drafted in 2011. He's had a decent amount of mileage. He is getting old, so you can question the age, but Kyrie Irving is not on a bad contract. Essentially, he's on pretty much the same contract as Rudy Gobert. He's not making max money right now. So this isn't also a guy who you're going to just have to deal all this money and bring in a Karl Anthony Towns type contract. He's making $36.5 million this year. So you're getting a superstar who is not on a crazy contract, can still play, I believe, who has the leadership, the experience, the clutch gene that I think this team needs around Anthony Edwards, around this supporting cast. So Kyrie Irving, in my opinion, is a very seamless fit, healthy. Now, the question is, what is Kyrie Irving worth? What are you willing to give up? Because if you want to get a star like Kyrie Irving, Even if Dallas is rebuilding, you have to give something back, of course. So there's a couple avenues that you can consider. So I'm not going to give like pure mock trades where I'm considering swaps, third teams, all these draft picks. I'm not. I will speak with a caveat. It's going to be really hard for Minnesota to land a player like Kyrie Irving in a way because there's not a lot of control over draft picks, right? I mean, the Rob Dillingham trade, 2030 swap, 2031 first. There's still first round trades or picks in the Rudy Gobert deal, 2027, 2029. And then you have that 2028 first. And that's a pick you can't really trade necessarily. You can swap it, I believe, with, the stipend rule, I think it's pronounced. So it's not necessarily easy to trade future first round picks. And there's also another point. Do you want control over 0 first round picks in Anthony Edwards' prime? So that's another conversation. So I will still give a couple players who could be in a Kyrie Irving deal if a hypothetical happened. So the first one, and this one looks like the cleanest when I went on Fanspo, Julius Randle, Rob Dillingham for Kyrie Irving. So and this isn't counting trades, here's why this would make sense for Minnesota. So you're swapping your second star, Julius Randle, for Kyrie Irving. And the question is, would you deal Julius Randle for Kyrie Irving? Julius Randle is fantastic. And I think he is one of the very best second options in the league right now. He's a great player, all-star caliber player. I think he deserves consideration. And I'm not saying I would dump Julius Randle, but Kyrie Irving, there's a next level of shot making, creation in the clutch than Julius Randle. I think having Kyrie in the perimeter and you can move Naz Reid into the starting lineup, that feels seamless. That makes a lot of sense in my opinion. So personally, just my opinion, and I'm not like super firm on this. I can hear the Julius Randle thing because I think he's fantastic. But I think if you could have Kyrie Irving or Julius Randle, you would have Kyrie Irving. In the Rob Dillingham situation, Dallas gets a young player. They can give reps. I believe Rob Dillingham with reps can still become a good NBA player. The question is that in Minnesota? Is that a situation that's going to mix and mesh? In my personal opinion, I'm worried that Minnesota could be the wrong team for Rob Dillingham because he has a style of play where if he isn't this awesome shot maker, his value goes down significantly because he is still a small guard with those physical limitations. And Chris Finch very clearly wants him to play like a true point guard. And we've seen that isn't natural for Rob. And he's kind of lost his confidence as a scorer. He's always double thinking everything. So I think if you deal Randall and Rob and maybe little, change and you got a Kyrie Irving, that's a trade that I would do personally because of the dynamic of Kyrie and Anthony Edwards. The upside with creation in the perimeter outside of Anthony Edwards on this team. Randall can do it. I mean, he just had the most efficient ISO game of the season against the Clippers. But Kyrie Irving's next level. And I still think Kyrie Irving has plenty to give. And Naz Reid, starter, that would be fun. And I think Naz Reid, we'll talk about him later, has another gear that he's tapping into right now. And he could tap into it more as a starter. So me personally, this is a trade I would be very much in consideration of. And then here's another one that you can make work. The money's pretty close, but Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo for Kyrie Irving. I'm less pro this. One, you're losing Naz Reid, right? This is a youthful piece. And Minnesota, I think it's a fair question. How many reliable young players do we have in Anthony Edwards' prime? Naz Reid's most certainly one of them. And you're trading that. You're trading Dante, who's been very solid for the Timberwolves this year. Definitely a bounce back season from last year. So Kyrie Irving, for those two, I think that's a lot of key depth. I think that's a lot of key reliable players who are pretty young, who could be in the Anthony Edwards window. So I wouldn't do that personally, but also a very financially sound one, I think. Rudy Gobert for Kyrie Irving. Rudy's making 35. Kyrie's making 36 and a half. There's some stuff you could probably do to make that trade work, but then Dallas has like 5 centers already, and you probably have to deal Rudy Gobert in a 3-team trade. What is Rudy Gobert worth in the trade market? Probably not as much as Julius Randle, Naz Reid, and maybe Dante. So there's just, or most certainly Dante. Dante's making 12 million. So I don't really see why that would happen. And then also you deal Rudy Gobert, and then there's questions about the rim protection of this team again, because even though Rudy Gobert isn't a perfect basketball player, he still provides so much value, of course, as a rim protector on this team. That's a tough pill to swallow for sure. So those are the potential ideas. Who knows where Minnesota actually stands on a Kyrie deal? It doesn't and wouldn't surprise me if Anthony Edwards was a very big fan of landing Kyrie with how much respect that he has for Kyrie Irving. I think it's a very interesting idea. And is it a risk bringing a guy in with an ACL injury in the future? Absolutely. That is definitely a risk. But my personal opinion, and of course, Kyrie would have to go through a physical, team doctors in this hypothetical scenario that I'm not saying is happening, but the team would have to approve of Kyrie's health as well. So I do think that it's very much worth considering. And I just think it'd be fun. It'd be fun to see Kyrie Irving on this team. And granted, I'm not sure if you guys all remember, but Kyrie Irving once requested a trade to the Minnesota Timberwolves when he first left Cleveland. It was when Jimmy Butler was on the team and Kyrie was starting to get disgruntled in Cleveland. He ended up going to Boston, which I don't think he requested to go to, but Minnesota was one of the teams he requested a trade to. I can't quite remember the other teams. I think Miami was in that. Maybe the Clippers. I might be wrong on the Clippers, but I do think Miami was in that conversation. And the Minnesota Timberwolves were. So, in a way, it's kind of a manifestation fulfilled. In some crazy world, this happened. You know, people have talked about Giannis rumors. I think Kyrie would be very interesting and honestly, probably much more realistic than Giannis, even though I'm very pro Giannis trade speculation. But yeah, I think Kyrie Irving to Minnesota, I'm not opposed to it. I think it's an interesting dynamic. And like I said, I'm not saying trade Julius Randle. I value and love what he's done, but you have to give to get, and you have to consider this at the bare minimum. Now, so here's now the next part of the show. So we are going to talk about the actual team right now. Beyond the rumors, we are going to highlight a few players. And the first player I want to highlight is Jaden McDaniels, who is coming off of maybe his best offensive game of the entire season against the Los Angeles Clippers. 27 points, 10 for 13. He started the game incredibly well. I think he started the game 7 points, 3 for 4. He was really the only guy producing against the Clippers in the beginning when Minnesota had that really slow start. And by the way, Minnesota, I'm pretty sure, just broke a record. 4 straight games of coming back down double digits. Timberwolves kind of celebrating that. I don't think that's celebration worthy with how easy the schedule is, and that's concerning. But back to the point, Jaden McDaniels was the guy who was really going on early. Second quarter, Jaden McDaniels doesn't get any touches, and Minnesota is down pretty considerably against the Clippers. But then in the second half, Jaden McDaniels was pretty much leading the charge of Minnesota getting back into the game and then taking the lead in the fourth quarter. And then Minnesota, I believe, had like a 9-point lead when Anthony Edwards returned. Jaden McDaniels was getting buckets, and he was doing it in a variety of ways. I mean, he was getting to the rim in transition, creating from the mid-range. His three-point shot is still absolutely butter, the third best three-point percentage in the NBA this season. Jaden McDaniels is all the way here, guys. There's no doubt. We're 23 games into the season. Jaden McDaniels, 16 points, well over 50% shooting, 48.6% from three. He's unbelievable. Jaden McDaniels, one of the best third options in the league. And my problem isn't with Jaden McDaniels in particular. My problem is with how little this guy is used for what he is showing. Jaden McDaniels, after being the hottest starter on the team in the first quarter against the Clippers, doesn't get touches in the second quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, when Jaden had 25 points, Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle come in and they start chucking isolation shots, completely icing out Jaden McDaniels late when Jaden McDaniels was what was working for how Minnesota got their lead back. Jaden McDaniels, there's nobody on the team as talented offensively that gets fizzed out on the team more than Jaden McDaniels. Honestly, when you look at the landscape of the NBA, Jaden McDaniels might be fizzed out of the offense more than almost any player in the league with what he's giving you with his touches. Now, I know people will say, like, what does Jaden McDaniels look like with a higher usage? Does he maintain this efficiency? I think he would, at least to a decent extent. Jaden, in other years, when he wasn't getting touches, he was not this efficient ever. This is a new Jaden McDaniels who's an improved shooter, a more confident creator, and he could do it from 3 levels at 6'10". Jaden McDaniels is unbelievable. And Minnesota is still giving him more touches this year. I believe this is the highest usage he's had of his career pretty easily, but there's still so much more. This Minnesota offense, Anthony Edwards is still, I think, maybe the most double player in the NBA. This team still lacks some creation. Why isn't Jaden McDaniels a part of this solution? He has the talent. He has the ability. I think his playmaking doesn't get tapped into enough. I think he has good feel finding the roller, which isn't talked about enough. I just don't really doubt that he has the ability to give this team 18 to 20 points per game right now. And this team, when was the last time he got more than 13 shots? He hasn't done it the last 10 games. Even in a game where he has 27 points, he only gets 13 shots. When you're shooting 76% from the field, that's when you give Jaden McDaniels 15, 16, 17 shots plus at minimum. And they were kind of doing it early in the season, but they've completely gone away from it. I think Minnesota, as you start playing really good teams and you need more than just Ant and Randall in a questionable bench to show up offensively, this is when Jaden McDaniels needs opportunity to shine. Give this guy 15 shots. Give this guy the opportunity to grow into that second star. And I think they are to an extent. I think the progress he's showing is really good. And I do think eventually he's going to get the reins as the number 2 on this team. But I think that time could be much sooner than people realize. Jaden McDaniels needs more than 13 shots in this team. Jaden McDaniels, he needs 15 in my opinion. And I know this sounds like very fan-based analysis, very simple, like just give the guy more shots, whatever. But honestly, in a lot of ways, with the way Jaden McDaniels is performing, it might really be that simple when you see the doubles Anthony Edwards gets. Jaden McDaniels, we've seen it this year. He punishes open space in ways that we've never seen before. He's money from 3 now. He is money when you put a mismatch on him. He can rise over anybody who's not 7 feet. The talent's there, guys. I think Jaden McDaniels is a star right now. A star. And I honestly think Jaden McDaniels is still, even with the sleep, one of the less utilized players in the league relative to the talent he has to get or has to give. So I'm all in on Jaden McDaniels. I think as this team continues to rise throughout the season, I think the best version of this team is with Jaden McDaniels with a higher usage, help him gradually get into that. And I think they are gradually helping him grow into that. But I think they could do it in a more accelerated manner. So Jaden McDaniels, man, he's fantastic. And I do believe that we need less moments when he gets fizzed out throughout the game just because, right, Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, they're going to get their usage. I don't think that means you fizz out Jaden McDaniels. If you can consistently involve Jaden McDaniels in this offense, I truly believe that's where the next level of this team lies. And now let's talk about another player, right? Another big name in this young core, Naz Reid. Naz Reid is officially back, everybody. So I'm not going to count the first 12 games of the season because, of course, Naz Reid, I think, was really going through a lot to start the year with the loss of his sister. And I think there was some sensitivity and time he deserved, which is why I wasn't really overreacting to his highly inconsistent offense, the really horrible defense that he showcased to start the season. I was pretty generous to that. And I think we're finally seeing why Naz Reid really deserved that grace, because Naz Reid in his first 12 games He had a minus 4.7 rating, 118.3 defensive rating. He was literally the most ineffective player in the Timberwolves rotation to start the year outside of Rob Dillingham. He was really bad. But then last 10 games, 16.9 points per game, 50, 40, 90, over 6 rebounds. And here's the key: 109.5 defensive rating, a +6 net rating. Naz Reid has completely flipped the script his last 10 games. Not only has he been fantastic, he's showing why I think he has a case as the best and most talented bench player in the NBA. His confidence as a shooter has been peak. His creation has been more comfortable. And watching the games, Naz Reid looks more deliberate defensively. He's playing harder. He and Julius Randle, we talked about it on a recent episode, not nearly as bad as it was in the beginning. They're starting to hold their own defensively. And in the fourth quarter, when Minnesota got that gap, those two, I believe, were a part of why, if my memory's correct, if someone wants to correct me, please correct me. But those two weren't liabilities in the fourth quarter defensively either. So we're getting a Naz Reid who is finally showing why Minnesota gave him that 5 years, $125 million. And he does need to showcase that he can be more consistent over an extended period of time. He had that issue last year, and with how inconsistent he was to start the year, that's still a question. But I do believe that we are in for the best stretch of Naz Reid's career on both sides of the floor in a lot of ways. I think the defensive growth has been better, and I think the offense, the shooting, the efficiency, he's showing why, as great as Nickeil Alexander-Walker is in Atlanta right now, with the second apron limitations, Minnesota had to really pick between Nickeil and Naz Reid. And I would still, as great as Nickeil looks, as badly this team could probably use another creator, which is why I'm talking about a Kyrie Irving trade. I still believe bringing back Naz Reid was still the right decision. The upside this guy has as a 6'10" shot maker, elite shooter, fantastic athlete with his fluidity, I still believe bringing back Naz Reid was the right decision. And I think he's going to continue showcasing that reality. I think that this Naz Reid that we've seen the last 10 games is much more close to the version we saw the first 11 games of the season. So I'm super excited about Naz Reid, what he's showcasing, and it's fortunate. It's fortunate that we are back to full Naz Reid propaganda, Naz Reid memes, and he is all the way back. So that's great to see. And the last person I want to talk about on this show is Jaylen Clark. Because Jaylen Clark, that Clippers game, along with Jaden McDaniels in the third and fourth quarter, I believe was the biggest reason why the Timberwolves were able to come back and extend that lead. The defense, the turnovers he forced were fantastic. The and ones he got offensively were very big, very critical. Jaylen Clark, when you look at the three young players who Minnesota were really looking at to take big leaps this year, Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon, Jaylen Clark has very evidently proven at this point in time he's the best of the three, and it's not close. Jaylen Clark, you can argue, even including Naz Reid right now, has been the most effective bench player on the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I mean, the numbers back it up. Jaylen Clark, when he's on the floor, he's a +5, which is really good net rating, but also defensive rating, 104.4 defensive rating, which that would be the second best defense in the NBA behind the Oklahoma City Thunder. Jaylen Clark, a perimeter player, having that level of defensive impact, that's so unique. That is so different because rim protectors in the NBA, they tend to be the ones who have the influence over defensive ratings the most. So the fact that Jaylen Clark comes in, makes Minnesota an astounding defense just by his presence on the floor in a lot of ways, with his turnovers that he forces, while also not being much of an offensive liability, he's still nailing 35% of his threes. He's a comfortable shooter from the corners. He gets layups, free throws, and threes. He literally generates the most consistent and efficient offense that you can as a role player. Jaylen Clark, I mean, when you watch him drive, I think you guys see this. There's not a lot of handle there, not a lot of creation talent there. He just kind of runs straight, draws a foul, and it somehow works. And then he nails a three in timely manners. This dude, Jaylen Clark, these are the type of players, when you look at Anthony Edwards' prime, that you want to keep on the team, because Jaylen Clark, these are the definition of winning role players. Low maintenance. They don't need the ball. They can play a lot of roles. Outstanding defense, culture setter. Jaylen Clark is fantastic. He's fantastic. And even with Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels, you can argue he's been Minnesota's best defender this season. And I mean, when you look at comparisons for Jaylen Clark, I mean, we've heard some of them from like Rudy Gobert, but I'm going to go extreme. There's some Bruce Bowen here. You know, Bruce Bowen, the San Antonio Spurs, like elite defender, like Hall of Fame level defender who didn't provide a lot offensively, but just came in, completely changed the tone. There's some Tony Allen here. I just think Jaylen Clark, when you look, smart man, because I believe he could be in free agency this summer if he wanted to. This is a dude Minnesota can't let go of when you look in the future, because these are just dudes, when you look at championship teams, these are the type of dudes that help win you championships. The ones who make life easier for your star by not needing the ball, hitting big shots, and most importantly, being a culture setter defensively from the perimeter. Jaylen Clark is a special player, special defender, showcasing why he won the Defensive Player of the Year in college basketball. Jaylen Clark has been so impressive this season. People look at the stats and say he's averaging less than 5 points a game. He's not that special. But when you watch Jaylen Clark, when you watch the analytics, this dude is so important to this team and very clearly the second best bench player on the Timberwolves. We've talked a lot about how the Timberwolves, they need more bench production, not only from Naz Reid, which he's given them lately, but also Rob and Terrence Shannon. Jaylen Clark is doing exactly what this team is asking of him, and he's been that special. So Jaylen Clark has been fantastic this season. And I should have said this before the show transition to Jaylen Clark and more when Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Anthony Edwards, or Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid were the highlights of the show. But can we just end the show by giving the shooting coaches so much credit on this Minnesota Timberwolves team? Jaylen Clark included in this, actually. The shooting development of a lot of players on this Timberwolves team has been outstanding. Outstanding when you look at the young players. Anthony Edwards, when he came into the league, was a talented shot maker, highly streaky, below 30% from three. Anthony Edwards, 5 years later, is the second best shooter in the NBA, who is just absolutely knocked down from three, off the catch, off the dribble. He gets whatever he wants from three. Anthony Edwards, the rise he's shown as a shot maker, historic. Naz Reid, talented player in college, very skilled, streaky player, streaky shooter, turns into the best three-point shooting big in the league off the bench. Naz Reid's always floating around 40% from three now. He can hit a step back, great off the catch, insane growth. And now Jaden McDaniels is the latest example, a dude a year ago who clearly doubted his shot. It was flat. I'm not a shooting coach, but it always looked like his shot was too right here, possibly blinding his eye from the three-point line. Not a ton of touch. Kind of an awkward upbringing from the shot base to his shot. It just wasn't fluid. And now we're seeing Jaden McDaniels so confident that he can kind of be out of balance and still throw a three-pointer. He can hit a pull-up three, knock down off the catch. And the shot looks different. The release looks different. It's higher. And the shot base coming up, it's fluid. It's balanced. There's not a lot of movement, not a lot of stiffness. Jaden McDaniels is looking like a really good shooter, and we're seeing how much that opens up his game, how much shooting has opened up Anthony Edwards' game. Naz Reid, Jaylen Clark couldn't shoot a lick in college, and now he's like sort of league average-ish from three, and he had an entire year when he's still figuring out his health after his Achilles injury in college because he couldn't play his rookie year. And he's already showing this much growth as a shooter. I think it's so amazing how much Minnesota is developing these young players as shooters. You know, there's fair questions about player development for like Rob Dillingham at this point in time. But when you look particularly at the 3-point shooting growth from so many young players on this team, it's truly remarkable. And this coaching staff, from Chris Finch to the shooting coaches top to bottom, they deserve so much credit for the growth we've seen from this Timberwolves team shooting the basketball. And Jaden McDaniels is the latest example of that. That is going to do it for this episode of Wilder Wolves. I appreciate you guys so much. Once again, if you could click subscribe, I would so appreciate it, because we are going to continue navigating this team throughout the year, reacting to the biggest rumors, storylines, trends with this team. You don't want to miss it. It is going to be so incredibly fun. Thank you all so much for listening. This is Wilder Wolves, Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.